So who won last night's Republican debate on Fox Business? Well, I'm going to give you my take on that. And again, I want to let everybody know before we continue here, I try my best to put myself in the shoes of just your average run-of-the-mill Republican voter when I watch this. So if we had a conversation about substance, that's a totally different discussion to have. But I don't think your average Republican voter is too concerned about substance. I think, unfortunately, they look for other characteristics in a person to determine whether or not they want them to be president. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep the framework and the paradigm in mind here, and what lens I'm viewing this through as I give you my take. And then we'll get into the polls and what they say as well. So perhaps unsurprisingly at this point, I have Donald Trump winning. I take no pleasure in saying that. I take no joy in saying that. But every debate to this point, I've said that I thought he won. Now, usually it's sometimes by little, sometimes by a lot. This one, I think it was by a decent amount, if I'm being honest with everybody. And what I noticed yesterday is he has this incredible ability to always flip the argument. Now, I don't think he does it as some sort of master debating tactic and he's some sort of next-level genius where he's figured out how to do these rhetorical sophist tricks. No, I just think that he's a dim bulb and this is the only way he knows how to talk. So he's just able to spin everything in the most positive direction for him. So one example of that is yesterday when he was attacking Cruz for his for where he was born, Cruz being born in Canada, he said something like, you know, hey, look, it's not me that's going to be against you on this. The Democrats are going to bring a lawsuit and, you know, you won't be able to, perhaps you won't be able to run in the general election. And then the audience started booing. And you would think that Trump would get like all flustered and think, damn it, they're against me on this. But Donald Trump, in his typical confident, you know, bravado-filled way, flips the argument back on Cruz and the audience and says, see, they're booing. They don't want you to make it to the general election. And then you have the audience burst out in laughter. And that little exchange was a microcosm of the entire night. Whenever anybody pinned Trump or, you know, the audience was against him, he found a way, a very confident way, to just brush it off his shoulder and move on. And I think your average Republican voter at home, they see that and they're like, yes, finally somebody who doesn't back down. Now, the Republican Party is known for not backing down, but on that point, he really is next level. Again, I don't think he's doing it because he's some sort of genius. I think he's doing it because that's how he is, and it just so happens that this is the kind of mentality that if you project it, the Republican base and your average Republican voter even is going to say, yeah, I like that and I like it a lot. And it's a nice change from the typical smarmy, sleazy politicians who we see all the time. So he's number one by a decent amount. Then I have Rubio at number two. I have him at number two because he's, yet again, he's treading water. He's, as I keep saying, guys, he's the establishment fallback candidate. If you're looking for a guy this time around who's most like John McCain 2 election cycles ago and Mitt Romney in the last election cycle, that's your guy. Now, obviously those guys I just named didn't become president, but they won the nomination. Why? Because when people actually got in the voting booth, they gave up the dream of the more, you know, aggressive Republican candidate, which was probably Newt Gingrich the last time around when he had his run and he was leading in the polls for a while. And they said, let's get serious here, and they voted for Mitt Romney. So he might be the guy that's the last man standing if he keeps doing debate performances like this, which are just kind of treading water, saying some of the right things, and getting enough people to say, yeah, we'll consider him. That could be very positive for him in terms of how this goes when people actually get in the voting booth. Then I have Christie at number three, believe it or not. Christie's like a slightly smarter, saner version of Trump. Now, I think his policies are still disastrous, and he's got major hurdles to get over if he really wants to have a shot at this. But I always find, or at least in the past 2 or 3 debates, he's had solid debate performances, and it's been enough to keep him on the main stage, you know, when other people have fallen, like they've had their moment in the sun, and then they went away. Like Carly Fiorina, for example, who was demoted to the undercard debate. So don't take too much away from it, but again, I think he had a strong performance. Ben Carson I have at number 4. He said roughly 3 words the entire time, but he didn't do any damage. He was up there tied with Trump for a little bit a few weeks ago or about a month ago, and then he fell off when the media started hammering him and actually covering the crazy shit he says, like stuff about the pyramids. Hey, that was actually biblical grain silos. Well, it's not, and you're a crazy person if you believe that, among the many other things he said. So he kind of fell off a little bit. Somehow, if Carson makes a wrong or silly statement, it affects him in the polls. Whereas Donald Trump can say anything, and he goes up in the polls. It's a really weird dichotomy. And then I have Cruz after that. Cruz came into this with high expectations. Everybody said that he's number 2 to Donald Trump. The recent polls have shown that. He was even surpassing him in some places, or he was at one point past him in some places like in Iowa. And everybody was expecting, hey, maybe this will be the guy, the establishment fallback guy. I mean, it's possible, but he's really more of a talk radio far-right candidate than people are thinking right now. Like I said at the beginning, the establishment fallbacks are Jeb Bush, who's doing horrendous, Scott Walker, who dropped out in 8 seconds, and Marco Rubio. I wouldn't really include Ted Cruz in that because he's not really the establishment fallback. Like I said, he's a little too far right-wing, a little too much red meat to the base in order for him to do well in a general election. So Trump handed him his ass in this debate, and I think Cruz did a horrible job. And then finally here I have Jeb at number 6. Jeb did a performance that's classic Jeb, said nothing in a confident way, said some sane things like, hey, Donald, not all Muslims are terrorists, and we shouldn't kick out all Muslims from coming to the U.S., and that sanity may come back to bite him in the ass, along with his last name. And it just seems like it's sad to watch this, man. I mean, he's hanging in there in the polls on some level. Like, I think nationally he's ahead of course, Fiorina, Kasich, and people like that. But he just never was able to surge. And he's just lagging, and it's sad to watch. And I don't think he's going to mount a charge because, for whatever reason, Rubio has established himself in a stronger way as the real establishment fallback guy, not only in the eyes of the public and the polls, but also in the eyes of the donors, and that makes a big difference. And then finally, I have Kasich in last. Poor guy, man. He opens his mouth, and every time he says something about, my record, I balanced the budget when I was in the federal government, and then in my state I did the same thing, But it's like, okay, we get it. He says it almost literally every time, and it's not his time. I mean, I feel like Kasich would have done well in the 1990s or the late 1980s in the Republican Party when they were slightly more sane. But now it's just, noise coming from a generic politician, and people are like, more Trump anger, give it to me. So let's go to the actual polls here, and we'll see what people thought immediately after the debate. So Slate has Ben Carson in last at 1%, Kasich with 2%, Christie with 2%, Jeb Bush with 2%, Rubio with 6%. They have Cruz at 10%, which I'm a little shocked by because, again, I think he got his ass handed to him. And then Trump with 70%. And that's unbelievable. 70%. We shoot on over to Drudge here. They have Bush at 1.5%, Carson at 1.6%, Kasich at 1.7%, Christie at 2.2%, Rubio at 8.5%, Cruz at 31.4%, and Trump at 53.1%. And this poll, by the way, had hundreds of thousands of people who voted in it. Now, again, these are unscientific, so, don't take them to the bank, but they're worth something, I think, at least. And then finally, we go to Time and their poll. Carson had 2%, Christie had 3%, Kasich had 4%, Bush had 8%, hanging in there in the Time poll. Rubio had 9%, Cruz had 12%, and Trump had 62%. 62%. The guy is just fucking owning them. He's owning them. So it really does look like it's Trump's race to lose. I've said this a few times before, but now I'm at the point where I don't even want to tolerate discussion on it. Like, if you take the position that it's not his race to lose, okay, then you just disagree with math. Because not only in all the snap polls is he winning, even when they do the scientific polls later on, he's winning. And he surged back. He was behind in Iowa and New Hampshire. He surged back. He's in the lead again. Nationally, he's leading by over 20 points or something like that. It's his race to lose, man. And I don't know. I don't know why it is, but I still don't see Cruz as the viable contender to him, because he's just the Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, far right base go-to, and those guys usually flare out at some point in these things. But I think his biggest contender is Rubio, and that's not good news, because if anybody can fuck this thing up and hand the election to Trump, it's fucking Waterboy Rubio. Because he's all talking points, he's an empty suit, he's a standard politician. Now, again, the standard politicians did well in the last two presidential election cycles on the Republican side. They got the nomination, John McCain and Mitt Romney. But it may just be another day in America, and it's just people don't want that anymore, and they want somebody who just comes across as super anti-establishment and an outsider like Donald Trump, even though he's not necessarily those things. So if you're fearing the Donald Trump nomination, I'm here to tell you that's a legitimate fear.